And welcome back to Law and Crime. Opening statements kicked off today in a Florida trial for a woman accused of fatally shooting a neighbor through her front door. This is a very serious case because, according to investigators, Susan Lawrence was seen arguing with children who were playing near her home. She allegedly threw a roller skate at one of the children, prompting the victim, who was the child's mother, Ajika Owens, to approach Lawrence's home, where she knocked on the front door to get her to come outside. Now, this is when Lawrence allegedly fired a shot through the door that struck and killed Owens in her upper chest. Lawrence did call 911 to report the argument that had ensued, but insists she did not intend to kill Owens. So I want to get you up to speed on the highlights from today's opening statements. This is Prosecutor Adam Smith, who delivered his argument for the state. It's actually an opening statement for the state, where he laid out the history of the defendant's rocky relationship with the victim and her children. So let's get into court now and listen.
Susan Lawrence shot a bullet through her own locked front door and killed her unarmed neighbor, Ajika Owens. You're going to hear in this case why this happened. You're going to hear about Susan Lawrence. You're going to hear about Miss Owens. They call her AJ Owens. You're going to hear that she has young children. There are two children that are going to come up in this case. Her young sons, Isaac Williams and Israel. You're going to hear why this shooting happened. Susan and Ajika were neighbors. They lived in a neighborhood that had quadruplexes in it, apartments. Susan lived across the street from Ajika. Next to Susan was a field. It wasn't on her property, but it was a field that was next to another apartment building. There were lots of children in this neighborhood. And a lot of those children, including Ms. Owens' children, played in that field. You're going to learn about some problems in this case, some issues between the defendant and Ms. Ajika Owens. You're going to hear that there were arguments between the two of them in the past, leading up to the shooting. You're going to hear what those arguments were about, the dog, the children. And you're going to hear that there were arguments between the two of them, multiple, but those arguments ended, and everyone went their separate ways. And in this case, you are going to hear, in detail, the shooting that happened on June 2nd, 2023. You are going to learn about the events leading up to the shooting. You're going to learn that that night, it was a Friday night, a summer night, and there were kids playing in the field next to Miss Lawrence's residence. They were playing in the field, and there was an adult with them, Mr. Franklin Cologne. And you're actually going to see the children and Mr. Cologne in the field playing. Why are you going to see them? Because the Marion County Sheriff's Office, in this case, took the defendant's phone, and were able to get videos that the defendant took of the kids playing in the field. Miss Lawrence was filming the kids and Mr. Cologne in the field on her patio, and then inside her house through windows. You're going to see these videos. You're going to see the kids playing. The kids finished playing as it got darker, a little bit before 9 o'clock. There's not many kids in the field anymore, but yet the defendant, Miss Lawrence, is still filming. What's she recording? Well, you're going to see that video too from her cell phone. She is videotaping roller skates that were left in the grass, according to her, about 5 or 6 feet from a sidewalk that lives up to her apartment. And in this roller skate incident, Miss Owens, Ajika's son, were there. And the defendant has an interaction with them, has a roller skate in her hand, talking to them, and ends up throwing the roller skate. And says, "Here, go fetch." You're going to see where the roller skates were. But the interactions with the children didn't end there at the roller skates. There was another interaction right thereafter involving children of Miss Owens, where the defendant, she says in her statement to the detectives, which you will hear, that she is on her patio pavement area with an umbrella, telling the kids to leave, talking with her hands, while the kids, about 5 to 7 feet away from her, or in her words, not even close to her. It's at this point, after videotaping the kids, after videotaping the roller skates, after throwing the roller skates, after waving the umbrella around, interacting with these kids, you will hear that Susan calls 911. You're going to hear that 911 call. Pay attention to that 911 call.
Okay, Wayne Dennison, let me turn to you first. We're at the point now the prosecutor's giving his opening statement. It's not an argument, although I wish he'd give me a little bit more of a story, although I think we're getting to it. But we're going to see a roller skate, and then we're going to hear a 911 call. Do you anticipate that that 911 call is going to show that perhaps Ms. Lawrence has a mental disease or defect, and that's really where this is going in this case in mitigation for the shooting?
No, I expect the 911 call to be a reflection of Miss Lawrence trying to cover her tracks. Ultimately, because, she just shot through the door, and then there's going to be a call that reflects the fact that there's this activity that occurred. I don't know if it's going to be a mental defect. It's going to be a suggestion that she didn't intend to shoot the victim.
All right, so Alexis Rosenberg, rate the prosecutor for me on the story he is telling so far.
Rated? I agree with you, Linda. I think it needs more of a story. It needs more pizzazz to it. He's just saying this is what you're going to hear, which I get from a prosecutor. He's got to lay it out step by step, and he's telling the jury what they're going to hear so they can anticipate it. But I really think he needs to crank it up a little because we're really not getting a feel, like you said, of where he's going with this at this point. Yeah, now we know he's going because I'm going to tell you that we're going to hear the rest of this where the prosecutor Smith wrapped up his opening statement, and we're going to remind the jury that this is not a whodunit. We know who done it. This is whether Ms. Lawrence, the defendant, had a justified reason to kill Ajika Owens. Let's listen.
The question in this case is whether the defendant was justified in doing this. The defendant gives a statement to detectives, two different statements. It's a long statement. You're going to hear those. And you're going to hear the defendant say many things. You're going to hear the defendant say what happened leading up to the incident. And you're going to hear the defendant say that she was in fear. That's why she called 911. But you're also going to hear the defendant, and pay attention to the defendant's interview, is that when she was with the kids, with the roller skates, or with the umbrella, that incident, the kids tell her, "I'm going to tell my mom." And the defendant says, "Go tell your mom. I don't care." The defendant says that. Then you're going to go on and say the defendant was such in fear of Ajika Owens because of these prior incidents. But yet she says, "Go tell your mom. I don't care." You're hearing the defendant talk about calling 911 before Ajika Owens comes over to her house. And again, you're going to hear that 911 call. And I want to draw your attention one more time to that 911 call to listen. Because at the end of the defendant's complaints in that 911 call, out of the blue, you're going to hear this at the end. The defendant says, because what's going to happen is his mom's going to go out, wait for the officer, and run and say, "Oh, I was threatening her kids," which just isn't true. out of the blue, she says that. Because that's believed what she thought was going to happen. So the defendant will make statements about leading up to this, and then the defendant is going to state what happened inside her residence when Ajika was there at the door. The defendant is going to say multiple times that she was in fear. Multiple times. But the defendant is going to describe what actually took place. The defendant is going to say she was actually in the bathroom when she heard the bang. Then she goes out to the bathroom. From the bathroom, she goes out to the door and she hears that it's Ajika. Despite being so scared, she then goes back in to the bathroom to finish washing her hands. Then banging starts again. She goes out, this time into the kitchen for the phone, and then the banging won't stop. She's saying things to Ajika, telling Ajika to leave. And then the defendant goes into her bedroom, grabs the loaded firearm, then walks all the way back out to the locked front door, and the police are on the way as she's been told. She points at the door, fires one shot at the center of the door, shooting and killing Miss Ajika Owen.
Okay, Wayne Dennison, you hit it on the head, shooting and killing. The prosecutor set it up that she's going to say the kids saying that she's going to call the police, or she said the kids are going to call the police. The mother's going to call the police and is going to say, well, they were threatening, that type of thing, right? So you kind of hit the nail on the head here. We just had a case, Benefield, which is Ashley Benefield here, where there was a defense in a domestic violence, allegedly. A prosecutor found her guilty where her ex-husband, followed her, I guess it wasn't really ex, followed her into the bedroom, and she took out a gun she had and she shot him, and the jury found her guilty of manslaughter. Here, there's the same kind of time lapse, although there's nobody who got killed that's in Ms. Lawrence's house. Ajika Owens is outside the house. That's a big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, she's outside the house, but the question that he raised about the locked door, I think we're going to hear over and over again, because it's going to be very hard for the defendant to argue, well, I was in genuine fear for my life, irrespective of the fact I knew she was on the other side of a locked door, and therefore I, shot to the center of that door. I think it's a difficult defense, but I think that's the defense we're going to hear.
Okay, so that brings me back again, Alexis Rosenberg, to the question is, the defense is going to go for justification, but do they also have to go for justification with some type of mental disease or defect, even though it's not a mental disease, just to get rid of that intentionality? Or are they just going to go for justification? Because my view is that her motivation is racism. I'm going to say that right now, that she's scared of these black kids, she's scared of the black woman, and she also thinks they're going to lie about her being the aggressor, and so she then becomes the aggressor. Talk to me.
I agree with you, Linda. I think they're going to have to bring up some mental component, because it is going to be a very difficult self-defense argument based on the fact that she's standing behind a locked door. So it's not, you brought up Ashley Benefield, that was a different case because he was actually in the house and allegedly, coming at her in a physical manner. So I think those are an entirely different set of facts. So I think in order to be able to make that argument, they're going to have to show that there was some mental component that increased her level of fear or perception of fear.
So a very, very interesting case. I'm going to take what both of you say right now. We're going to take a break, but I want to tell you what, on the other side, as you know, where there is a prosecution opening, there is also a defense opening, and this time the defense chose to exercise that right. We're going to hear exactly what the defense is from the defense mouth. Stay with us. We are Law and Crime.